Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're gonna dive deep into the circulatory system, but not the boring textbook version.
No.
We're talking like really mind-blowing mechanisms,
Not.
how your blood flow adapts to everything,
Hmm?
from like just a tiny scratch
Yeah.
all the way to like intense exercise.
We'll be using Dr. Rasha Eldeeb's Physiology handout as our guide today.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So before we get too far,
Yep.
I'm curious, what is like one of the most surprising things you've learned about the circulatory system? Something that, just made you go, whoa, I had no idea.
Well, what really gets me is how even like the smallest changes can trigger these huge chain reactions.
Oh, okay.
Like, just imagine like you lightly scratch your skin,
Mm-hmm.
and that starts this whole cascade we call the triple response.
Triple response. Okay, you've got my
So
attention.
first you see this red line appear right away.
Right.
That's capillary dilation. Those tiny blood vessels right at the surface.
Oh, so they're reacting instantly.
Instantly,
Mhm.
even to a super minor injury.
So it's like your body saying, hey, something's up here.
Exactly. But it doesn't stop there.
Oh.
That red line starts spreading out, and that's called a flare.
Oh, wow.
That's arterial dilation, so the slightly larger blood vessels.
Oh, so it's spreading.
They're joining in. And this isn't just a passive thing.
Okay.
This flare is driven by a local axon reflex.
Okay.
Think of it like a mini nervous system right there in your skin,
Yeah.
reacting in real time.
Wow, I had no idea there was so much happening under the surface. But wait, you said a triple response.
Yep.
What's the third part?
A few minutes later, you might notice a little swelling, and that's called a wheal.
Okay.
It's caused by increased capillary permeability.
Oh, okay.
So basically, the capillaries get a little leaky,
Okay.
letting fluid seep out.
Got it. So redness, spreading redness and swelling.
Mm.
But what's really driving this whole process?
Histamine plays a major role.
Wait, seriously, the same histamine that like makes my eyes water during allergy season?
It's a reminder that even these simple processes involve a complex web of chemicals and signals.
Okay, so we've seen how reactive our skin circulation is, but what about other parts of the body? Like how does blood flow change in the lungs, say, when oxygen levels are low?
That's where we see one of the most counterintuitive things in the whole system.
Really?
You see, most blood vessels dilate or widen when oxygen levels drop to let more blood through.
Right.
But in the lungs, it's the opposite.
Opposite.
We constrict.
Hold on. Why would your body restrict blood flow to areas that need more oxygen? That doesn't seem very efficient.
It seems counterintuitive, but it's all about efficiency. By constricting those vessels in areas that are low on oxygen,
Okay.
blood gets redirected to areas where gas exchange is happening better.
Oh, so it's like the lungs are saying, hey, this section isn't pulling its weight. Let's send the blood over there where it can actually pick up some oxygen.
Exactly. It's like an internal traffic control system.
Wow, that is amazing. So we've explored the skin and lungs. What about the digestive system? How does circulation change there, after all? It has to deal with everything we eat.
Oh, the digestive system. It's a whole other world down there,
Mm-hmm.
with blood flow being controlled by so many factors.
Okay.
We call it the splanchnic circulation.
Okay.
And it's a dance between the sympathetic nervous system and intrinsic metabolic regulation.
Okay, so two different forces at play, signals from the nervous system and then from the digestive organs themselves.
Right.
How do they work together?
Think of it like this. After you eat, your digestive system needs a surge of blood to break down all that food.
Mm-hmm.
So those organs are saying, hey, we need more blood down here to get to work.
Okay.
And the blood vessels dilate to let it in.
It's like placing an order for more blood and the circulatory system is happy to oblige.
Exactly. But then imagine you're suddenly stressed.
Ah.
Your body shifts into fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
and digestion isn't so important anymore.
Right.
So the sympathetic nervous system takes over, constricting blood vessels in the digestive system and sending that blood to your muscles and brain.
Makes sense. It's like your body saying, hold the burgers. We need all hands on deck for this emergency. That makes perfect sense. It's like our bodies are always prioritizing where blood flow needs to go
Yeah.
based on what's happening internally and externally.
It really is a dynamic system.
Okay, so we've explored the skin, the lungs, and the digestive system, but
Right.
what happens when we start moving? I imagine blood flow has to increase significantly during exercise.
Oh, you're absolutely right. The changes in blood flow to your muscles during exercise are really something.
Okay.
We call this skeletal muscle circulation,
Okay.
and it can do incredible things. At rest, blood flow to your muscles is pretty low, kept in check by the sympathetic nervous system.
Okay.
But the moment you start moving, things change dramatically.
So it's like a switch flips and the muscles are suddenly demanding more blood.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And there are multiple players involved. First, we have those sympathetic cholinergic vasodilator fibers. Those are specialized nerves that release acetylcholine, which causes the blood vessels to widen.
So those nerves are like the on switch for increased blood flow.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
But that's not all. Adrenaline also plays a crucial role.
Oh, really? I always thought of adrenaline as like a stress hormone, not an exercise hormone.
It's a key player in helping our bodies meet those demands of physical exertion. And then there's this cool thing called active hyperemia.
Active hyperemia.
Basically, the harder your muscles work, the more byproducts they produce.
Okay.
And those byproducts actually signal for even more blood flow.
So it's like a self-regulating system. The more the muscles work, the more blood they demand.
Exactly. This interplay of nervous signals, hormonal influences, and this metabolic feedback allows for a tenfold increase in blood flow to the muscles during exercise.
Wow. It's a real testament to how adaptive our circulatory system is.
It really is.
Okay, we've covered the skin, the lungs, the digestive system, and the muscles. Now, what about the most important organ of all, the brain? I can only imagine how critical a constant blood supply is for proper brain function.
Absolutely. The brain is extremely sensitive to any changes in blood flow.
Okay.
It relies on some sophisticated mechanisms to ensure a steady supply. One of the most crucial is myogenic autoregulation.
Okay.
Basically, the blood vessels in the brain can adjust their own diameter to maintain consistent blood flow.
Oh, wow.
Even when blood pressure is fluctuating.
So it's like the brain has its own internal pressure regulator.
Exactly. It's a brilliant protective mechanism.
Yeah.
But that's not all. The brain is also super sensitive to changes in certain metabolic factors, like carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion levels. If those increase, it means the brain is working hard.
Okay.
And the blood vessels dilate to increase flow and clear out those byproducts.
So it's not just about pressure, it's also about responding to the brain's real-time metabolic needs. It's like the brain is constantly communicating with the circulatory system.
Yeah, exactly. And here's another interesting tidbit.
Okay.
Did you know that increases in intracranial pressure, that's the pressure inside the skull, can actually reduce blood flow to the brain?
Wait, really? Why would that happen? It seems like it would be the opposite.
It's another protective mechanism. If pressure inside the skull gets too high, it can actually compress those blood vessels and reduce blood flow. It's a way of protecting the brain from damage.
Wow, the brain really has multiple layers of defense when it comes to regulating blood flow. So we've explored the brain, but what about the kidneys? They're responsible for filtering our blood, so I imagine blood flow plays a crucial role there as well.
You're absolutely right. The kidneys have this incredibly unique circulatory system that's designed for filtration. We call it renal circulation.
Renal circulation.
And it all starts with those tiny filtering units called nephrons.
Okay.
Each nephron has not one, but two arterioles, one going in and one going out. And get this, they can be regulated independently.
Wow. So it's like having two valves to control the flow of blood in and out of each filtering unit? But why is that so important?
Well, the kidneys need to maintain a very specific pressure to filter blood properly. If it's too high, it can damage those nephrons. If it's too low, waste products don't get filtered out.
Right.
So by having these two independently regulated arterioles, they can hit that sweet spot, the perfect pressure for filtration.
That's incredible. It's like the kidneys have their own internal pressure gauges and valves constantly adjusting to keep everything running smoothly.
Precisely. But there's more. The kidneys also rely on that myogenic autoregulation we talked about in the brain.
Okay.
And they have these special cells called the macula densa.
Macula densa.
They sit near the arterioles and act as sensors, monitoring the salt levels in the fluid being filtered.
So we've got the arterioles acting as valves, the blood vessels themselves autoregulating, and these special cells monitoring salt levels. It's like an orchestra. But what about the heart itself? It's working nonstop to power this whole system, so it must have a pretty impressive blood supply of its own right.
Absolutely. The heart is a true workhorse, and it demands a robust and reliable blood supply.
Okay.
We call this the coronary circulation. And it's fascinating how it's tailored to the heart's specific needs.
So what makes coronary circulation so unique? What drives blood flow to the heart?
Well, one of the main things is the heart's own metabolic needs.
Okay.
The harder it works, the more oxygen and nutrients it uses, and the more byproducts it produces, like carbon dioxide.
Okay.
Those byproducts act like signals telling the coronary arteries to dilate and increase blood flow.
So it's like a built-in feedback loop. The heart's workload dictates its own blood supply?
Exactly. But there's more. Blood flow through those coronary arteries actually changes throughout the cardiac cycle.
Changes. Wait, I thought blood flow to the heart had to be constant.
You'd think so, but during systole, when the heart contracts,
Right.
the pressure inside increases a lot, and that compresses those arteries.
Oh, wow.
So blood flow actually decreases a bit.
So when the heart is working its hardest, it's actually getting less blood? That doesn't seem right.
It seems counterintuitive, but think about it. During systole, the heart is squeezing so hard
Yeah.
that basically squishes the blood out of those arteries.
Oh, that makes sense. So when does the heart get its main blood supply then?
During diastole, when the heart is relaxed,
Okay.
the pressure drops, those arteries open back up, and blood flow increases.
So it's like a perfectly timed delivery system?
Exactly. The heart gets its fuel during its break time.
That's wild. It's like a perfectly choreographed dance blood flow, ebbing and flowing with the heart's rhythm. But we've talked about metabolic needs and mechanical forces.
Yeah.
What about the nervous system and hormones? Do those play a role in coronary blood flow too?
You bet. The sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response,
Right.
it usually increases coronary blood flow, which makes sense because when we're stressed, our heart rate goes up.
Yeah.
And the heart needs more fuel to keep up, and adrenaline.
That fight or flight hormone.
Exactly. It also increases coronary blood flow.
So when we're facing a challenge, our bodies prioritize sending blood to the heart,
Right.
making sure it has what it needs to power through. But what about the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system?
It generally has the opposite effect of slowing things down
Okay.
and reducing coronary blood flow.
Yeah.
We also have hormones like ADH and angiotensin II,
Mm-hmm.
which can constrict those coronary arteries.
Mhm.
And then there's nitric oxide, a powerful vasodilator,
Okay.
which increases flow.
So we've got metabolic factors, mechanical forces, nervous system input, and hormonal influences, all fine-tuning coronary blood flow. It's incredible.
It's truly a symphony of signals all working together to keep the heart running at its best.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. It makes you appreciate just how much is going on behind the scenes to keep our hearts beating. Now we've explored the skin, the lungs, the digestive system, the muscles, the brain, the kidneys, and even the heart itself.
Yeah.
But there's one more incredible circulatory system we need to talk about. The one that's designed to support a growing life before it's even born.
Ah, yes. Fetal circulation. It's a marvel of nature, a completely separate circulatory system
Really?
with its own unique adaptations to support a developing baby.
That's amazing. Tell me everything. How does a baby get oxygen and nutrients before it can even breathe?
Well, it all starts with the placenta,
Okay.
that amazing organ that connects the baby to the mother's blood supply.
Right.
It provides oxygen and nutrients and removes waste products.
It's like a combination of lungs, the digestive system, and kidneys all in one.
Exactly. It's the baby's lifeline.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets interesting. Fetal circulation is totally different from adult circulation
Oh, why is that?
because the baby's lungs aren't functioning yet. So the oxygenated blood from the placenta needs to bypass the lungs.
Okay, so the lungs are essentially offline until birth.
Right. And the fetal circulatory system has these clever adaptations to make that happen.
What kind of adaptation?
They have these special shunts, which are like shortcuts in the system. One of the most important is the foramen oval.
Okay.
It's an opening between the two upper chambers of the heart.
Oh, wow.
So blood can flow from the right side to the left side, bypassing the lungs completely.
So the blood just skips the lungs altogether.
Pretty much. And there's another shunt called the ductus arteriosus
Okay.
that connects the pulmonary artery to the aorta.
Mm-hmm.
It allows any blood going towards the lungs to be diverted to the aorta and out to the body.
So the fetal circulatory system is basically designed to prioritize the developing organs.
Exactly. The brain and body get the oxygen-rich blood first,
Yeah.
and the lungs, which aren't working yet, are largely bypassed.
It's incredible how it all works, like a perfectly designed detour.
It really is. And to make things even more efficient, fetal hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in red blood cells, actually has a higher affinity for oxygen than adult hemoglobin.
Oh, wow.
So it grabs onto oxygen more readily, making sure the transfer from mother to baby is super efficient.
That's amazing. It's like nature has thought of everything when it comes to supporting a growing baby.
It really has.
Fetal circulation is truly remarkable.
It is. And there's still so much more to explore.
Well, I'm ready for more. Let's keep diving deeper into this incredible system.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've seen how the circulatory system adapts to support a growing fetus. That's mind-blowing. But now I'm curious about something else. We've talked about major changes like exercise and even birth, but what about more subtle everyday things? Like how does something as simple as like gentle pressure on our skin affect blood flow?
That's a great question. It seems insignificant, but even gentle pressure can trigger a fascinating response in your skin circulation. It all comes down to these tiny muscles called precapillary sphincters.
Precapillary sphincters.
Yeah, they control blood flow into the capillaries.
Oh, okay, so they're like these miniature gatekeepers.
Exactly. And when you apply gentle pressure, it causes those sphincters to contract, essentially squeezing down on the capillary.
Oh, so that's why my skin turns white when I press on it. The blood's being squeezed out.
Exactly. It's called the white reaction. It's a simple demonstration of how sensitive our circulatory system is to pressure changes.
Wow. I never realized there was so much happening under the surface. Makes you wonder what other subtle things are affecting blood flow without us even realizing it.
Oh, there's so many factors.
Yeah.
But while we're talking about skin,
Yeah.
let's talk about skin color and temperature.
Okay, interesting. We all know our skin changes color. We blush, we tan, we get pale when we're cold. How does blood flow play into all of that?
It turns out that skin color is mainly determined by capillary diameter
Okay.
and skin temperature by arteriolar diameter, those larger vessels.
Oh, so whiter capillaries mean more blood flow and a redder color.
Right.
And whiter arterioles mean more warm blood reaching the surface and a warmer temperature.
Precisely. So when you blush, for example, the capillaries in your cheeks dilate,
Okay.
letting more blood through, giving you that rosy hue.
And when you're cold,
Yeah, when you're cold, your arterioles constrict to conserve heat.
that's why our skin feels cooler and might even look a bit blue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about maintaining that balance.
It really is. There's a whole hidden world of blood vessels constantly adjusting right beneath our skin.
There really is. But let's shift gears for a moment and dive back into coronary circulation, the blood supply to the heart.
The heart, the engine that keeps us going, it must require a ton of energy to keep pumping all day and night.
Oh,
How much blood are we talking about here? How much fuel does this engine need?
it's a lot. The normal blood flow at rest is about 70 to 90 milliliters per 100 grams of cardiac tissue per minute.
Okay.
So for an average-sized heart, that's roughly 250 milliliters per minute.
250 milliliters per minute, and that's constant, even when we're just relaxing.
Even when you're sleeping. And here's another interesting fact. The heart extracts about 65% of the oxygen from the blood that flows through it.
65%. Wow, that's way more than other organs, right?
Much higher. Skeletal muscle only extracts about 25%.
It really shows how hard the heart is working, squeezing out every last bit of oxygen it can get. But what happens when the heart needs to work harder, like during exercise? Can it get even more blood?
Absolutely. That's where coronary vascular reserve comes in.
Coronary vascular reserve.
It's the heart's ability to increase blood flow beyond its resting level.
So it has this extra gear it can kick into when it needs to.
Exactly. During exercise, coronary blood flow can increase dramatically, sometimes up to 1,000 milliliters per minute.
Wow, 1,000. That's amazing. But what controls this increase? How does the heart know it needs more fuel?
Just like in other parts of the body, metabolic regulation plays a key role.
Okay.
The coronary arteries are very sensitive to changes in the heart's metabolic needs.
Okay.
So when the heart's working harder, it produces more carbon dioxide and other byproducts.
Right, and those byproducts act as signals for the arteries to widen.
Exactly. They're like, hey, we need more blood down here, stat. And there's another molecule at play here, adenosine.
Adenosine, isn't that connected to caffeine somehow?
You got it. Caffeine actually blocks adenosine.
Really?
So when you drink coffee, you're preventing adenosine from dilating those blood vessels.
Huh, so coffee could actually mess with the heart's blood flow.
It's a possibility, but the effects are usually pretty small in healthy people.
Okay, that's good to know. So we've got metabolic regulation going on. What else?
Well, we also have mechanical regulation.
All right, how blood flow decreases during systole and increases during diastole.
Precisely. It's like the heart gets its fuel during its break.
So it's a well-timed system, but don't forget about the nervous and hormonal control we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah, they play a role too.
It seems like the heart's blood supply is influenced by a whole bunch of factors.
It is. Metabolic needs, mechanical forces, the nervous system hormones. It's a lot to juggle.
It's like a whole symphony of signals keeping the heart going strong. But speaking of symphonies, let's revisit fetal circulation. We talked about how the fetal circulatory system is adapted for life in the womb with those shunts allowing blood to bypass the lungs.
Right.
But what happens to those shunts after birth? I mean, they're not needed anymore, right?
It's pretty amazing. Shortly after birth, those fetal circulatory structures change.
Change how?
They form an oval, that opening between the heart chambers.
Right.
It gradually closes
Okay.
as pressure builds up in the left atrium because now the lungs are working.
So all the blood is flowing through the lungs now.
Exactly. And that closure prevents blood from bypassing the lungs.
So it's like a door that slams shut once the lungs are online, making sure blood takes the scenic route from then on.
Uh-huh. That's a good way to put it.
A?
And the ductus arteriosus.
Right, the vessel connecting the pulmonary artery and the aorta.
Yes, it also constricts and eventually closes off.
So all the blood from the right ventricle goes through the lungs just like in an adult. It's incredible how those structures just disappear once they're not needed anymore. It's like the body knows exactly when to switch things up.
It really is. It's a seamless transition from fetal to adult circulation. But this transition isn't always perfect.
Oh, what do you mean?
Sometimes those fetal structures don't close properly.
Okay.
And that can lead to congenital heart defects.
Oh, that sounds serious.
It can be, although the severity can vary.
Okay.
A common one is a patent foramen oval.
Patent foramen oval?
Yeah, it means the foramen oval doesn't close all the way. It's often harmless, but in some cases it can increase the risk of stroke.
So even though those structures are supposed to disappear, they can sometimes stick around and cause problems.
Exactly. That's why early detection and treatment of those heart defects is crucial. It's a good reminder that even though our bodies are amazing, they're not perfect.
That's a good point. Okay, so we've seen how the circulatory system adapts during major transitions like birth, but now I'm curious about something else we talked about earlier, the impact of external factors on circulation. Specifically, how does intracranial pressure, the pressure inside the skull, affect blood flow to the brain?
That's an important one. Remember how the brain relies on myogenic autoregulation to keep a steady blood supply even when blood pressure changes?
Right, it's like the brain's got its own internal pressure regulator.
Exactly. But if intracranial pressure increases too much, it can overwhelm that system.
Okay.
That increased pressure compresses the blood vessels in the brain, which reduces blood flow and can lead to cerebral ischemia.
Cerebral ischemia, what's that?
It means the brain isn't getting enough oxygen and nutrients, which can cause all sorts of problems. Dizziness, confusion, seizures, even stroke.
That sounds scary. What causes intracranial pressure to increase?
It could be a lot of things. Head injury, brain tumor infection, even certain medications. It's definitely something you want to catch early.
Yeah, no kidding. So even though the brain has this amazing ability to regulate its own blood flow, it has its limits.
Absolutely. There's only so much pressure it can handle.
That's a good reminder to protect our heads and get checked out if we experience any weird symptoms.
Definitely. Better safe than sorry. Speaking of things we might not be aware of, remember that white reaction we talked about earlier?
Yeah, how pressing on your skin causes it to turn white.
Right. It's a great example of how even a light touch can affect blood flow.
You said it's caused by those precapillary sphincters contracting, but why? Why would our bodies reduce blood flow to an area that's being touched?
It might seem strange, but it's actually protective. It's like your body is saying, hold on, let's reduce blood flow here just in case.
Oh, so it's like a just-in-case measure. Like, what if that pressure is something dangerous?
Exactly. Our bodies are always looking out for us even when we don't realize it.
That's fascinating. Makes you realize how much is going on beneath the surface all the time. Okay, let's go back to skin color and temperature for a sec. You mentioned that skin color is mainly about capillary diameter, and temperature is about arteriolar diameter. But what influences those diameters? What makes them change?
Well, it's a combination of things. Genetics, environment, emotions, even medical conditions.
So it's not just one thing, it's a whole system.
It is. Think about blushing, for example.
Okay.
When you blush, the capillaries in your cheeks widen, letting more blood through. And that's triggered by a mix of emotional and physical responses.
So there are actual physical changes happening in our blood vessels when we blush. It's not just in our heads.
Exactly. Your nervous system and hormones are orchestrating the whole thing. It's a great example of how our thoughts and feelings can have physical effects.
That's so cool. What about temperature? What causes our skin to get warmer or colder?
One of the main factors is the temperature around us.
Okay.
When it's cold, our bodies try to conserve heat. So the blood vessels in the skin constrict, reducing blood flow to the surface.
That's why our skin feels cold and looks pale.
Right. And when it's hot, the opposite happens.
Our blood vessels widen to release heat.
Exactly. It's all about maintaining a stable body temperature. And all of this is controlled by the autonomic nervous system.
Oh, so it's like our bodies have a built-in thermostat that's always adjusting blood flow to keep us at the right temperature.
That's a great way to think about it. Our bodies are constantly adapting.
They really are. Okay, we've talked about how blood flow to muscles increases during exercise.
Yeah.
But what about other organs? Do they get more blood too, or do they get less?
That's a good question. It's important to remember that blood flow is dynamic. It's always changing. During exercise, blood flow to the heart and lungs also increases.
Right. Of course, the heart has to pump harder and the lungs need to take in more oxygen.
Exactly. But at the same time, blood flow to the digestive system and kidneys actually decreases
Oh, why is that?
because they're not as essential for immediate survival during exercise.
Oh, so it's like our bodies are saying, okay, we need to focus on the muscles in the heart and lungs. Let's put everything else on hold for now.
Exactly. It's all about efficiency, making sure our bodies can perform at their best.
It's amazing how our bodies can prioritize like that. But how does it all work? What controls these changes in blood flow?
Blood flow regulation is a multi-layered process.
What do you mean?
Well, we've got local metabolic signals, neural control, and hormonal influences, all working together.
Okay, break it down for me.
So first we have those local metabolic signals.
Like the byproducts we talked about earlier.
Right. When an organ is working hard, it produces things like carbon dioxide and adenosine.
Mm-hmm.
And those act as vasodilators, widening the blood vessels in that area.
So it's like the organ is saying, hey, I need more blood over here.
Exactly. But we also have neural control.
Okay.
The autonomic nervous system can override those local signals.
Oh, so it can say, actually, we need more blood somewhere else.
Precisely. The sympathetic nervous system, for example.
The fight or flight system.
Right. It generally causes vasoconstriction, which narrows the blood vessels.
Okay.
That helps redirect blood to the heart and brain when we're stressed.
So it's like our body is saying, okay, time to focus on survival. Everything else can wait.
Exactly. And the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest system.
Yeah, it does the opposite. It widens the blood vessels,
Okay.
promoting blood flow to organs involved in digestion when we're relaxed.
So our bodies are constantly switching back and forth between these two systems.
They are. And then we have hormones.
Right. Hormones are involved too.
They can either constrict or dilate blood vessels, depending on what's needed. Like adrenaline?
Adrenaline, that fight or flight hormone.
Exactly. It constricts most blood vessels,
Okay.
but it dilates the vessels going to skeletal muscles.
Oh, so it's making sure those muscles get the blood they need to fight or flee?
Precisely.
Yeah.
We also have angiotensin II, which constricts blood vessels,
Mm-hmm.
and nitric oxide, which dilates them.
So it's like this incredible balancing act.
It is. Metabolic factors, nervous system input hormones, all working together to make sure blood flow is optimized.
It's mind-blowing. Our bodies are so complex.
They really are. But speaking of complex, let's go back to fetal circulation for a moment.
Okay.
We talked about how the fetus relies on the placenta
Right.
and those shunts that bypass the lungs.
Yes, the foramen ovale and the ductus arteriosus.
Exactly. But those are only needed before birth.
Right. Once the baby's born and starts breathing, those shunts need to close.
Exactly. Shortly after birth, they undergo a remarkable transformation.
What kind of transformation?
Well, the foramen oval, that opening between the heart chambers,
Yeah.
it gradually closes up
Okay.
because the pressure in the left atrium increases.
Because of the blood coming from the lungs.
Exactly. So now blood can't bypass the lungs anymore. It has to go through them to get oxygenated.
So it's like a one-way door. It swings shut once the lungs are working.
Ha. That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And the ductus arteriosus.
The connection between the pulmonary artery and the aorta.
Right. It also closes up.
So all the blood from the right ventricle goes through the lungs now.
Precisely. It's like flipping a switch from fetal to adult circulation.
It's incredible how it all happens so smoothly. It's like the body just knows what to do.
It's an elegant transition, but sometimes things don't go perfectly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sometimes those fetal structures don't close completely.
Oh,
And that can lead to congenital heart defects.
like what?
Well, a common one is called a patent foramen oval.
What does that mean?
It means the foramen oval doesn't close all the way.
Oh.
It's often harmless, but in some cases it can increase the risk of stroke.
So even though those structures are supposed to disappear, they can sometimes cause problems.
That's why it's important to catch these defects early.
That's true. Okay, so we've talked about how the circulatory system adapts during birth, but now I'm curious about something else we mentioned earlier, how external factors can affect circulation. Specifically intracranial pressure, the pressure inside the skull. How does that impact blood flow to the brain?
That's a great question. Remember how the brain uses myogenic autoregulation to keep its blood supply steady?
Right, even when blood pressure is fluctuating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if intracranial pressure gets too high, it can overwhelm that system.
So it can overpower the brain's own internal regulator.
Exactly. That pressure can compress the blood vessels,
Okay.
reducing blood flow to the brain, and that can lead to cerebral ischemia.
Cerebral ischemia. What's that?
It basically means the brain isn't getting enough oxygen,
Oh.
and that can cause all sorts of problems: dizziness, confusion, seizures, even stroke.
Wow, that sounds serious. What causes that pressure to increase in the first place?
It could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
Head injury, brain tumor infection, certain medications. It's something you want to address quickly.
Yeah, for sure. So even though the brain is incredibly good at regulating its own blood flow, there are limits.
Absolutely. Too much pressure can disrupt everything.
That's a good reminder to protect our heads and be aware of any strange symptoms.
Definitely. Early intervention is key. Speaking of subtle things that affect blood flow, remember the white reaction we talked about?
Right. How pressing on your skin makes it turn white.
It's a great illustration of how sensitive our circulation is.
You explained that it's caused by those precapillary sphincters, but I'm still wondering why. Why does our body reduce blood flow to an area that's being touched?
It might seem counterintuitive, but it's a protective mechanism.
Okay.
It's like your body saying, hey, something's pressing here. Let's be cautious and reduce blood flow just in case.
So it's a precaution, like maybe that pressure could be something harmful.
Exactly. Our bodies are amazing at anticipating potential threats.
Wow. It's incredible how much is going on without us even realizing it. Okay, let's circle back to skin color and temperature again. You mentioned that skin color is related to capillary diameter and temperature to arteriolar diameter.
Right.
But what are some things that influence those diameters? What makes them change?
Well, it's a combination of things.
Okay.
Genetics, environment, emotions, medical conditions, all sorts of things.
So it's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of factors.
It is. Like, think about blushing.
Okay.
When you blush, those capillaries in your cheeks widen,
Right.
and that's caused by a combination of emotions and physical reactions.
So it's not just in our heads, there are actual physical changes happening when we blush.
Exactly. The nervous system hormones, they're all involved. It's a fascinating example of how our minds and bodies are connected.
That's so cool. What about changes in skin temperature?
Well, the biggest factor is the temperature around us.
Okay.
When it's cold, our bodies try to conserve heat, so the blood vessels in the skin constrict.
That's why our skin gets cold and pale.
Right. And when it's hot, they widen to release heat.
So it's all about keeping our body temperature stable.
Exactly. It's controlled by the autonomic nervous system.
It's like our bodies have a built-in thermostat that's always adjusting to keep us comfortable.
Uh-huh. That's a good way to think about it. Okay, now let's talk about exercise.
Okay.
We've discussed how blood flow to muscles increases during exercise.
All right.
But what about other organs?
Yeah, do they get more blood too or less?
Good question. During exercise, blood flow to the heart and lungs also increase.
Oh yeah, of course the heart is working harder and the lungs need to get more oxygen.
Exactly. But at the same time, blood flow to the digestive system and kidneys actually decreases
Oh, why is that?
because they're not as crucial for survival in that moment.
So it's like our bodies are shifting resources, prioritizing the heart, lungs, and muscles.
Precisely. It's all about optimizing blood flow for peak performance.
Wow. It's incredible how adaptable our bodies are. But how does it all work? What controls these changes in blood flow to different organs?
It's a complex process involving a lot of different factors.
Okay, like what?
Well, we have local metabolic signals,
Okay.
neural control, and hormonal influences.
So it's not just one thing, it's a whole system working together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's start with those local metabolic signals.
Like the byproducts from working organs.
Right. When an organ is working hard, it produces things like carbon dioxide.
Okay.
And those act as vasodilators, widening the blood vessels in that area.
So it's like the organ is requesting more blood.
Exactly. But we also have neural control.
From the nervous system.
Right. The autonomic nervous system can override those local signals.
So it can decide where blood flow needs to go.
Exactly. For example, the sympathetic nervous system.
The fight or flight system.
Yes, it generally causes vasoconstriction, narrowing the blood vessels.
Okay.
That helps redirect blood to the heart and brain during times of stress.
So it's prioritizing those vital organs.
Exactly. And the parasympathetic nervous system does the opposite.
Widening the blood vessels.
Right. It promotes blood flow to the digestive system when we're relaxed.
So it's like our body is constantly switching back and forth between these two states.
It is. And then we have hormones.
Right, hormones are involved too.
They can either constrict or dilate blood vessels depending on what's needed.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Adrenaline's a great example.
Adrenaline, the fight or flight hormone.
Right. It constricts most blood vessels,
Okay.
but it dilates the vessels going to skeletal muscles.
So it's making sure those muscles are ready for action.
Precisely. We also have angiotensin II,
Okay.
which constricts blood vessels, and nitric oxide, which dilates them.
So it's this amazing interplay of signals all working together.
It is. Metabolic factors, nervous system input, hormonal influences, they all contribute to regulating blood flow.
It's mind-boggling. Our bodies are so incredibly
They
complex.
really are. And it all works together so seamlessly.
It's truly remarkable. Speaking of remarkable, let's circle back to fetal circulation for a moment. We talked about those shunts that bypass the lungs before birth.
Right, the foramen oval and the ductus arteriosus.
Exactly. But what happens to them after the baby is born?
Well, shortly after birth, they undergo a fascinating transformation.
What happens?
The foramen oval gradually closes up
Okay,
because the pressure in the left side of the heart increases.
because the lungs are working now.
Exactly.
F.
And the ductus arteriosus also closes up.
So now all the blood is going through the lungs to get oxygenated.
Precisely. It's a smooth transition from fetal to adult circulation. But sometimes things don't go perfectly.
Oh, what do you mean?
Sometimes those shunts don't close completely.
Oh.
And that can lead to congenital heart defects.
Like what?
A common one is called a patent foramen oval,
Okay.
which means the foramen oval stays open.
Hmm.
It's often harmless,
Yeah.
but in some cases it can increase the risk of stroke.
So those shunts can actually cause problems if they don't close up properly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's another reminder that while our bodies are amazing, they're not always perfect.
Very true. Okay, we've seen how the circulatory system changes during birth, but now I'm curious about something else we mentioned earlier, how external factors can affect circulation, specifically intracranial pressure, the pressure inside the skull.
Right.
How does that affect blood flow to the brain?
That's a great question. Remember, the brain uses myogenic autoregulation to keep its blood supply steady.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if intracranial pressure gets too high,
Yeah.
it can overpower that system and actually compress the blood vessels.
Oh, wow. So too much pressure is a bad thing.
It is. It reduces blood flow to the brain, which can lead to cerebral ischemia.
Cerebral ischemia.
Basically means the brain isn't getting enough oxygen.
Oh, no.
And that can cause all kinds of problems. Dizziness, confusion, seizures, even stroke.
That sounds scary. What would cause that kind of pressure buildup?
Could it be head injury? Brain tumor infection? Some
Yeah.
medications? Lots of things can cause it.
So even though the brain is good at regulating itself, it can be overwhelmed.
Exactly. It highlights how important it is to protect our heads and be aware of any unusual symptoms.
Definitely. Okay, shifting gears a bit. Remember that white reaction we discussed earlier?
Yeah, when you press on your skin and it turns white.
You mentioned it's caused by those precapillary sphincters contracting, but I'm still not clear on why. Why would our bodies reduce blood flow to an area that's being touched?
It seems counterintuitive, but it's a protective mechanism.
Okay.
It's like your body's saying, hey, something's going on here. Let's be cautious and reduce blood flow just in case.
So it's like a preemptive strike, just in case that touch turns out to be something dangerous.
Exactly. Our bodies are always looking out for us.
That's incredible. Okay, last question about skin color and temperature. You said skin color is related to capillary diameter and temperature to arteriolar diameter.
Right.
But what are some things that can make those diameters change?
Well, lots of things. Genetics, environment, emotions, medical conditions.
So it's not just one thing, it's a whole web of factors.
Exactly. For example, blushing.
Okay.
When you blush, it's because the capillaries in your cheeks are widening.
Right, letting more blood through.
Exactly. And that's caused by a combination of emotional and physical responses.
So there are actual physical changes happening when we blush.
There are. Your nervous system and hormones are controlling it. It's a great example of how our thoughts and feelings can affect our bodies.
Wow, that's so interesting. What about changes in temperature?
One of the main things that affects skin temperature is the temperature outside.
Okay.
When it's cold, our bodies try to conserve heat. So the blood vessels in our skin constrict, which reduces blood flow to the surface.
And that's why our skin gets cold and pale.
Exactly. And when it's hot, those blood vessels widen to release heat.
So it's all about maintaining a stable body temperature.
Precisely. This is all controlled by the autonomic nervous system.
It's like our bodies have a built-in thermostat that's always adjusting to keep us comfortable.
It is. It's pretty amazing how it all works.
It really is.
Okay.
The last thing, we talked about how blood flow to muscles increases during exercise.
Right.
But what about other organs? Do they get more blood too?
That's a great question. It's important to remember that blood flow is dynamic. It's always changing to meet the body's needs.
Okay.
So during exercise, blood flow to the heart and lungs also increases.
Makes sense. They're working harder too.
Exactly. But at the same time, blood flow to the digestive system and kidneys actually decreases
Oh, why is that?
because those organs aren't as essential for immediate survival during physical activity.
So the body is prioritizing the heart, lungs, and muscles.
Precisely. It's all about making sure those key players have enough blood to function optimally.
Wow. Our bodies are so good at adapting like that. But how does it all work? What controls those changes in blood flow?
Well, blood flow regulation is a complex process involving several factors.
Like what?
We have local metabolic signals, neural control, and hormonal influences, all working together to fine-tune blood flow.
Okay, so it's not just one thing, it's a whole orchestra of factors.
Exactly. Let's start with those local metabolic signals.
Okay.
When an organ is working hard, it produces certain byproducts like carbon dioxide,
Right.
and those act as vasodilators, which means they widen the blood vessels in that area.
So it's like the organ is signaling that it needs more blood.
Precisely. But we also have neural control.
From the nervous system.
Right. The autonomic nervous system can actually override those local signals.
Oh, wow. So it can decide where blood flow needs to go.
Exactly. For example, the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for our fight or flight response, it generally causes vasoconstriction, which means narrowing of the blood vessels.
Okay.
This helps redirect blood to the heart and brain during times of stress.
So it's prioritizing those essential organs.
Exactly. And the parasympathetic nervous system does the opposite. It causes vasodilation, widening the blood vessels.
Okay.
This promotes blood flow to the digestive system and other organs that are important when we're relaxed.
So our bodies are constantly switching between these two systems depending on what's going on.
They are. It's a delicate balance. But we also have hormones that play a role in regulating blood flow.
Right. Hormones.
They can either constrict or dilate blood vessels depending on the situation.
Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Adrenaline is a classic example.
Adrenaline, the fight or flight hormone.
Exactly. It causes most blood vessels to constrict,
Okay.
but it dilates the blood vessels that supply our skeletal muscles.
Oh, that makes sense. So our muscles are ready to go if we need to fight or run away.
Precisely. We also have angiotensin II, which is a powerful vasoconstrictor.
Yeah.
And then we have nitric oxide,
Right.
which is a vasodilator.
So it's like a constant tug of war between these different factors.
It is. But it all works together to make sure our organs are getting the blood flow they need.
It's truly amazing how our bodies can do all of this without us even thinking about it.
It's a testament to the incredible complexity and efficiency of our circulatory systems.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's go back to fetal circulation for a moment. We talked about how the fetus has those shunts that bypass the lungs,
Right.
the foramen ovale and the ductus arteriosus.
Exactly. Those are crucial before birth, but after the baby is born,
Yeah.
they need to close up.
So what happens to them?
Well, shortly after birth, they undergo a remarkable transformation.
What do you mean?
The foramen ovale, that opening between the heart chambers,
Yeah.
it gradually closes up
Okay.
as pressure builds up in the left atrium from the now functioning lungs.
So the blood can't bypass the lungs anymore.
Exactly. It has to go through the lungs to get oxygenated. And the ductus arteriosus also closes up.
Wow, so those shunts just disappear.
Well, they don't exactly disappear,
Yeah.
but they become non-functional.
Oh, okay.
So now all the blood from the right ventricle is directed to the lungs, just like in an adult.
It's amazing how the body knows exactly when to make those changes.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's a truly elegant transition. But like we were saying, sometimes those shunts don't close completely, and that can lead to congenital heart defects.
Right, those can be pretty serious.
It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but shifting gears a bit, have you ever considered how something as basic as gravity affects our circulation?
Gravity. I mean, it keeps us on the ground, but I haven't really thought about how it affects blood flow.
Well, when you stand up, gravity pulls blood downwards, right?
Right.
So pulls in your legs and feet.
Oh, okay.
And that can actually lower blood pressure and reduce flow to the brain.
So is that why we get lightheaded when we stand up too fast?
Exactly. Our bodies have ways to counteract that, like constricting those blood vessels and increasing heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes those mechanisms are a little slow.
That makes sense. So gravity is another thing our circulatory systems are constantly adjusting to.
It is. And this is especially important in conditions like orthostatic hypotension, where
Mhm.
blood pressure drops significantly when someone stands up.
Right. I've heard of that. It's more common in older adults.
It is something to keep in mind as we age.
Okay, good to know. But speaking of external factors, what about altitude? How does that affect circulation?
Altitude has a big impact because the higher you go, the less oxygen there is in the air.
Right.
So your body has to work harder to get the same amount.
Okay.
Your heart rate and breathing increase. And over time, your body actually starts producing more red blood cells.
Wow. So your blood can carry more oxygen.
Exactly. It's an adaptation, but it takes time. That's why it's important to acclimatize slowly when you travel to higher altitudes.
So you don't get altitude sickness.
Exactly. Headaches, fatigue, nausea, shortness of breath, no fun.
Yeah, that sounds awful. So we've learned a lot today. We've explored the circulatory system from top to bottom and even looked at how it adapts to all sorts of things. Exercise, pregnancy, altitude.
It's been quite a journey. We've just scratched the surface, but hopefully you have a better understanding of just how incredible this system is.
I definitely do. It's mind-blowing to think about all the intricate mechanisms working behind the scenes to keep us going.
And remember, a healthy lifestyle goes a long way in keeping your circulatory system in tip-top shape.
Right, things like diet, exercise, and managing stress.
Exactly. Take care of your body.
Yeah.
It will take care of you.
Great advice. Thanks for joining me today for this deep dive into the circulatory system.
It's been my pleasure. Until next time, stay curious.